Lots happening at the El Toro Water District, as always, in July. We're using a lot more water this time of year as well. We're all drinking, we're all watering the lawns a little bit more, and we want to welcome Director Kathleen Freshley to our program. Thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity of really talking with you and with the community, because one of the real challenges for infrastructure is making sure that it is reliable. Like, the mission of El Toro is to ensure reliable water.
Right.
Okay, with that is clean and meets all the U.S. and California health standards. We also have the responsibility. Another mission is to ensure that the wastewater we treat, effectively, cost effectively, but conscious of the health issues that can come from it. And so in doing that, it requires capital to maintain the facilities. And if people think back, like the waste treatment plant, we'll show you later, but you see it on the golf course if you go down Ridge Route. That plant was built by Cortese in 1962.
Wow.
And and the purpose of having that plant was he wanted treated water for the golf course. Now, most people don't realize this, but there's a big water line just for the golf course that GRF has the responsibility for.
Right.
That was installed in 1962, and so hopefully they're reserving and recognizing that there's going to be a time that water line may have to be replaced.
And I think that's the thing people don't maybe understand or don't think about when they're thinking about water. They think about water when, one, a pipe breaks, or two, hey, my water tastes funny. And that's all part of what goes into really assessment management, capital planning, and making sure that the money is set aside for those constant replacements and making sure everything's working as we go.
Absolutely. And so what we've done as an agency is we've gone out and we've working with consultants and have developed software, and you're going to see the pictures here as we go through.
Let's go to slide our first slide up, the water recycling plant that we were talking about.
Yeah, the water recycling plant. See, and the pump stations. That was the first one where we hired consultants to work with us and go out and evaluate all the assets. Now there's 1,766 assets in those two areas, just in the recycling plant and the pump stations.
And when we talk about assets, we're just talking about separate parts of the whole system.
It could be a valve.
Right.
It could be valves. It could be joints. It could be pumps. It could be fans. I mean, all of those things have to work in synchronism.
And all of those things have their own lifespan and their own failures. And,
Absolutely.
Some are run until they break, and some are no, this needs to be replaced, like filters, those kinds of things.
That's right. And so what we're showing here are these slides that our engineering and operations people are using now to form the basis of developing, actually it's a 50-year plan, looking out 50 years as to what are we going to need to spend and where and when. And so this whole exercise takes into account, and you'll see from one of the slides, the asset discipline, like mechanical or electrical, or is it instrumentation, or is it civil? It could be just simple civil stuff, and so those are the things you condition. And then the next estimate is to take, okay, what's the condition of these things?
Right, and that's the next slide. Slide 3 kind of gives us that condition, the average condition, which is good but not new.
Right. Yeah, and then we're over 60 years old, and so being average condition is good.
Sure.
But at some point it's going to be less than average, and it's going to be in trouble. So the next slide then is we go through and we determined what's the useful life.
Right.
How much useful life can we expect?
Right, run of life of whatever that item is going to be.
Yeah, if it's a valve, what's the expected life of the valve? Is it 30 years? Is it 10 years? Or is it 50 years? And depending on its condition, it could be any one of those things.
Right.
But having that understanding is important, and so that was the analysis that was done, and it's showing then. That's showing on slide number 4.
Right.
Now, the next thing we do then is say, okay, now we've determined possibly what the useful life is. The remaining thing to really consider then is what would be the consequence of failure? Because just because something is old doesn't necessarily mean it has to be replaced.
Yeah.
It depends on the consequence if that particular item fails.
For instance, a fan can fail, and okay, we're going to replace the fan, we're going to shut down this when we have other ones back up. But if a valve fails or a pipe fails, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, and we look at then what is the risk to us? Because if it's one that has a high risk and it goes, we rate it from 1 to 10, and 10 is the highest. If it happened to be a wastewater line that's dumping all the sewage into the street or into a creek, that becomes expensive.
Yeah.
We can't tolerate even that because, I mean, my God, we'd be in trouble with the EPA
you need to be more
and California
proactive
and
than
everybody.
Reactive to that one.
That's right. See, so that's why you want to take a look and say, okay, what's the risk to us? Because if it's a low risk, then that means the priority we have as far as allocation of our funds should be not as high as one that's a high risk. And that's the whole planning of this thing, is determining, and you'll see on there the average risk, the combining the condition and sequence of failure, and we get a risk score for each of the elements.
And that combines a number of things we've talked about in terms of all of those risks and danger and all of those kinds of things.
And all those things. See? So this is really a tool to help us to make sure that as we proceed, that we're really investing the money that comes from the ratepayers, that's where it's coming from, that we're investing the funds that you're giving us wisely with the greatest, the greatest effect for the community. To really make sure that we're doing, and then slide number 7 shows what our anticipated costs are going to be over the next 50 years.
Now, the costs always seem to outweigh what's coming in the door sometimes. Do you feel that way a lot of the times? Like we just, to do everything you'd want to do or like to do, there's no way that the current budget can really cover those things.
That's right. And that's exactly why you have to sit down and really study this thing and prioritize and making sure that when you're setting, because in the old days, before you had this kind of really analysis, we'd say, well, that motor's 50 years old, and it's designed for, we better replace that motor. Yet that might be a motor that on a fan that has very insignificant effect on the operation. And so the old days was we did it on the basis of age.
Right.
Just like we do with people. After 65,
Done.
regardless of whether they, what their capabilities are.
Okay.
See? And so this is the issue, and that's why we invested money in buying this software and working with the consultants to really come up with the most logical way of using the funds that we're going to. And so chart number 7 basically shows the whole next 50 years that we're going to need to spend close to $500 million. That's $10 million a year average. But not every year is going to be 10 million.
And we're not really talking about brand new builds here. We're just talking about maintaining the infrastructure that exists.
We're not building anything new.
Right.
And then if you look out in 2053, you see that real high peak. Well, that is a result of anticipating, because the next slide is 8. Slide 8 shows the R6 reservoir, which we just replaced, the bottom liner and the cover. That was $25 million, and its expected life is 30 years. So we are anticipating, we just finished it last year, or this year, and so we're anticipating we got to start setting money aside.
Right.
Because we know 30 years from now, we're going to have at least a $25 million bill.
Right.
That's a lot.
And that's today's money, so down to 30 years from now.
And 30 years from now, that could be $50 million. See, so that was the whole strategy that we had in coming up and buying that software and hiring the consultants to work with us, so that going forward, we're really using the funds that we get from the ratepayers the most effectively, we believe, for the, for our own society.
Yeah. And how's this process changed the way you guys look at maintenance and infrastructure in general?
Well, what we do is, it forces us to be really aware, and from an operations standpoint, we've just built software. If you go online and look at our monthly report, if you happen to, you'll see an operations report where we're monitoring now every, and we have set times where we're monitoring every valve, every connection throughout, and we track what we're finding, and how many are we replacing, and see how that conforms to what our anticipation, what we had planned and anticipated. We do know that right now, that going forward, because we know we got to get up to spending about $10 million a year, and currently we've been running we've raised it up to about $4 million a year, and it's got to get higher if we're going to fulfill our mission,
right,
to ensure that we're delivering you water that meets all the health standards and is reliable, and that we're taking away all the sewage and the wastewater, and to not have any health issues, and not create any other issues for the community based on our dumping water into waterways and things like this. Because let's recognize our wastewater that we don't use for recycling goes to the ocean.
Yeah. Well, those are the realities, and you guys are keeping on top of it over at El Toro Water District Director Catherine Freshley. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, you're welcome. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful for people.
I think it was very informative, that's for sure.
And
thanks a lot.
That was the purpose.
You're watching This Day. We'll be right back.